Hey folks, welcome again to another episode of the Tesla Model 3 Owners Club show. We're here on site and I'm Trevor Page.
I'm Kenneth Bokor. Welcome.
Today's episode is going to be to answer a bunch of questions that we get all the time in our video comments about what is the Tesla buying experience like? What is it that makes it special? What is it? At what point do I put my deposit down? When do I configure the vehicle? When do I place my order? And what is the delivery experience like? So we're here to answer that today. So we have a special guest. His name is Alan DePonsier. So welcome, Alan. Thanks for coming on the show with us
thanks.
today.
Welcome.
Great. Happy to be here, share my experience. It's been about a year now since I've had my car, so I'm trying to think back of how it was, but I'll do my best.
You have a Model S.
That's right.
Correct. And which model do you have?
The 70D.
So Alan, tell us, what was your decision-making process? Why a Tesla and not another vehicle?
Well, it's interesting. My family and myself, we're not really car people per se, but we do enjoy a nice car. We were looking to trade in our current vehicle, and we wanted to get something that was a nice sedan. I have a family of 5, so I have 2 teenagers at that time, grade 9 and grade 11, but I also have a 5-year-old. So we needed something that had space to seat all 3 in the sedan. We looked around at the traditional kind of luxury cars in kind of that price segment, and they're very nice cars, and each one had its pros and cons. But at the end of the day, it came down to we just weren't excited about the other ones, and then we kept looking at the Tesla, and we just kept going, wow, we're really excited about the Tesla. The other thing is a friend of mine's dad had one, and he brought it by, and we had a chance to drive it, and he's one of the original owners, I think, in Canada, and he raved about it. So that made me feel better about kind of the new experience with the Tesla. So that was kind of a little bit of the background on kind of which cars were in the consideration set. But when we actually started looking at the Tesla, why did we choose the Tesla? Well, it was kind of interesting. One is I looked at, did it have the space available? It had by far the most space available for a family of 5, not only for seating room, but it also had like the amount of trunk space, and then you have the front trunk. It was amazing how much, and I never use the front trunk because the back is so big. Secondly, the driving experience was amazing. Like, it's just incredible kind of how smooth it is, the acceleration, everybody probably knows about kind of the handling. But on top of that, the user experience was iPhone-like. You've got the large screen, and I think that was the wow factor for the kids. The kids have never really been engaged in any buying experience for a car, but they were like going to the mall with us to look at them. They were the ones going, holy cow, Dad, we got to get the Tesla. Are you going to get the Tesla? Are you getting the Tesla? My 5-year-old, who is now like grown up on an iPad, was like, Dad, are you getting the Tesla? We got to get the Tesla. Sat in the back seat, the kind of the rumble seat that's looking backwards. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but we didn't actually get that feature, but it was just the whole buying experience was a wow factor for our kids.
Was there any concern about getting into the fully electric vehicle versus your standard ICE cars? Because that would be, of course, a dramatic change for you and potentially for your driving habits and to think about the entire infrastructure. Now, you bought a 2015, so only a year ago, here, at least in the GTA in Ontario, there is a substantial infrastructure that is continuing to grow as we speak. But was there any concerns or anything in your mind about, I'm making a kind of a radical shift here from car technology. How's that going to last for me for the long run?
Yeah, there was 2 major considerations. One of them was exactly what you said is, we have a cottage that we drive a couple hours to. We have family that we go on trips that are like 3 hours away. We do like to go on family trips where we might drive for long distances. Would an electric car allow us to do that? So that was a big consideration. So I did lots of homework up front to say, would that meet our family's needs? We do have 2 vehicles, so we always had kind of the backup. Would we use the Model S? So going into it, I thought, the Model S, I'll probably use maybe half the time we go to the cottage, et cetera, or when we go on long trips. But the reality is, since we've had it, I use it like 95% of the time. The only time I use my SUV now is when actually I have to like tow something or something I really need, something the S can't do. The second consideration was, what would be the resale value? You're dropping a lot of money on this vehicle, and it was very popular at this time. But 3-4 years from now, when I go to either trade it in or buy a new vehicle, would I have the same resale value? So right now it's very popular, but working at a large bank, you always had the consideration of, what's the financial impact? So there was risk. I actually decided to lease because I said I'm going to hedge my bet.
Of course.
If it doesn't hold its value, which I don't see anything today that would suggest it's not going to, at least when I leased it, I would have the decision of protecting myself.
Great. Yeah, we have a lot of viewers, I think, that are thinking about leasing, and we get financial questions here.
I think that the fact that the vehicle is a technical vehicle, it's very technology oriented, and because technology moves very quickly, that for some feel that leasing would be a better option to protect themselves because there's only so much you can do in hardware The software is obviously, upgradable in the vehicle, but later on you can, trade it up for, like right now, the big talk is about autopilot version 2 hardware that's going to be coming on future vehicles. Is it retrofittable? I don't think it will be, but I mean, these kind of factors, factor in with this kind of stuff. So.
And I think most people, as they're looking at the buying experience, they have their own situation. And I think that would be my advice is, for us personally, we do have two vehicles. We primarily drive the Tesla. Anytime we have a chance, we drive the Tesla. I've only had a couple situations where I've decided to go with the other vehicle just because we were going to a smaller town. Like a friend might have a cottage in a remote area where there's not a good plug-in option.
Correct.
So you just, you have to use your own judgment. But the new, all the new superchargers they're putting on is very helpful. But you have to do a little bit more planning when you go on a trip. There's not a gas station or an electric plug-in, on every block.
Exactly, and you're a very typical example of, I guess, the North American client, where we have greater distances that we are used to traveling, even ad hoc. Whereas in Europe, primarily they can get away with one vehicle being a full EV because of the condensed areas and the. They've been ahead of the supercharger and the charging infrastructure of North America as well. So it's interesting that you made those comments as well. So you selected your Model S 70D. That was kind of what you decided on. Can you walk us through the design process of that? So you select your vehicle, you put a deposit. What happens next?
Actually, even before I put the deposit, essentially what you do as part of the buying process is, when I went to the store, the folks in the store were very helpful. But unlike a traditional car dealership where everything's kind of done through people and then maybe online and mobile capabilities support the people experience, it starts with online and kind of your mobile experience and design process, of which people support that. So even when you're in the store, they'll take you over to they'll show you your options and you can pick colors and all the different options in front of you. But essentially then you'll go to a computer and you'll actually go and they'll log you into an account that's designed for you. And I still have it myself, which is called My Tesla. And essentially you will pick out your options and essentially you'll do your choices. And then throughout the whole buying process, if you think about different options you want to add or if there's things you want to deselect, you just go back in and keep changing those options. And it automatically shows you the price impact as you go through that process. Once you actually commit to actually buying and you put your deposit down and you fill out all the paperwork, and again, it's all online, you have 1 week from the point you put your order in to change your mind. But after that week's done, you're locked. And then obviously if you want to change your mind after that, there's a much bigger financial impact.
And when they were walking you through the options, were they explaining what some of those options were if you weren't familiar with what they were, like the tech package or air suspension or anything like that? That would be unique to what they're trying to tell you.
Yeah, they're very helpful. And I found we actually probably we bought it in Toronto at the Yorkdale shopping mall. And I would say we probably went there a couple times before we actually officially bought it. You're going to have questions, maybe online it explains it quite well, but you still want to talk to somebody about kind of what does this really mean? And they were very helpful.
So one of the questions that we've had in some of our comments is, after you put your deposit down, somebody had asked, when do I start making payments on the vehicle? So the Tesla vehicle is much like anything else. You put your deposit down, and then when you receive the vehicle, that's when you start making payments.
That's no different than any other car buying experience, essentially. Until the car arrives and you take order until you've got the car in possession, the delivery, that's when you'll start making your payments. Okay,
good. Now, once you finalize all your options, the week's gone by, it's done, it's all cooked now. You had to wait for your car. Was it an inventory model that you purchased, or was this a build to order?
No, we did a build to order. Okay. So I think it was around early May, we actually put our order in officially. And we received basically the first week of July. So it was approximately 60 days from order to actually receive. And then through the entire process, I'm in the marketing area. And we do a lot of work around online experiences. Essentially, it's kind of like the FedEx experience, if I use an example. They actually walk you through the process.
They tell you when sourcing parts in production.
So I don't remember exactly all the steps, but I remember saying, it's actually the order's been placed. And then the next stage was, okay, they're starting manufacturing on this date. And they expect it. So there's always this expected delivery date, which has a plus or minus of a few days or a week.
Would you say the communication was fairly steady and pretty accurate in the end?
Yeah, it was very good. I think they just manage your expectations extremely well.
Okay, great.
You know, and again, it's like anything. It's not a perfect science. You're always excited. You always want it to be earlier. But the reality is they were pretty good at being pretty close to the expected date.
But their communication was fairly consistent and constant as far as keeping you up to date with the progress.
Yeah, it's all online. And then I can't remember. There might have been some email alerts that kind of say you've moved to the next stage. And if you're ever curious, you just go in and you're waiting to see when it moves to the next stage.
Now, your communication with your delivery specialist, because you get assigned a delivery specialist.
Right.
Okay. I'm assuming you took delivery at the Lawrence location.
That's right.
Okay. So, were you in fairly constant communication with your delivery specialist as far as the steps were concerned once your vehicle was actually in transit to you?
Yeah, I would say out of the overall experience, if there's one part that I thought they could have done a little bit better job was around the delivery. I think what was happening is they had this bulk. What happened is they were taking the prices up at a certain time in Toronto, or that was the rumor. So I put my order in just before that, which I think many other folks did to kind of take advantage of that opportunity. So what happened is I think they had this bulk of orders go in, and then I think they all kind of got manufactured around the same time. And I remember talking to the delivery specialists that the parking lot at Lawrence was packed with cars.
It still is.
Not a very big one.
It still is.
So I think, everybody's excited about getting their car. When I actually got the call from the delivery specialist, it actually took a little bit longer than I anticipated to actually get my time booked.
Okay.
Again, it's a few days. So once you get it booked, you go in, and then they do a really good job. I think it was about a 2-hour session where you go in, and I think even when you buy other cars, I bought another kind of gas-oriented car recently too, and it's about the same time. There's so many bells and whistles on new vehicles today. It takes a long time to walk you through. The reality is, and you can't remember half of it. Exactly. At least I can't.
Exactly, and you're quite right on that. Now, so on that turnover process, you go in, you spend a couple of hours. Are there main features and functions that they focus on, obviously, to at least make sure you walk out with that knowledge? I mean, they say, yeah, there's a book you can read, but where do they focus their time on that turnover process?
I think they focus on the essentials that you need to know, but I think they're always there. Like I said, most people are going to remember probably 30, 40, 50% of what they tell you in that 2-hour period, unless you're like taking copious notes. There's support documents online that can help you with that, but the delivery specialist is available. And the great thing to me, I love email. As opposed to having a call, so I would just email them or to say, hey, I can't remember this. Or
let's not forget too that the owner's manual is actually right on the screen itself. You can call it up at any time you want.
And also, I think I like technology and stuff, so I was very happy to kind of play with it to figure it out.
Sure. Yeah.
Not sure if I was dealing with my parents or my in-laws, whether they would be so user-friendly. So it really depends. I'm very comfortable with a kind of a online first experience.
Now, prior to your delivery, because the other question that we get from a lot of the viewership is, what is my preparation process to receive this car, like charging it at home? What was your process? What did you do to get ready for the vehicle?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the most important thing is you have to think about kind of how you're going to charge your car. So the good news is where I work is a brand new building downtown. It actually has wonderful electric plug-ins. It's the best parking.
Level 2.
It's the best parking in the whole building, so I think that's a big bonus. Yeah. But at home, you're going to need to put in a plug. And what's interesting is it's actually very simple. You can buy these fancy plug-ins, but the reality is I can't remember if it's a dryer plug or a stove plug.
It's a NEMA 1450 stove plug. That's all.
Yeah, so essentially what I did is I just talked to an electrician and have them I put 2 plugs in my driveway because I have a long driveway in the city, so I had one at one end of the driveway and one at the other end. I think it cost me like $500 to $700 to actually get it all installed, assuming the most important thing is, does your electrical panel support, I think it has to be 200 amp, correct me if I'm wrong?
No, well, the plug will be a 40 amp, so you'll need to have a panel that can give you 40 amps at, off peak most likely is when you charge.
So I put 2 plugs. Maybe it's a bit overkill. I probably only use one of them. Mm-hmm. So you have to have at least. I would have definitely 1 plug at home. It's a pretty simple process, but it's going to cost you probably $500, I would think. Tesla was very good at giving you electrician options in the Toronto area. So if you're not sure who to call, here's a list that has done it.
They dealt with in that.
Yeah, I had recently done a renovation at our house, so I already had an electrician, so I just went through that.
Okay.
Secondly, so if you think about if you have a second property, so I have a cottage that's 2.5 hours away, which is critical that I have no problem getting there on a charge, but when I get there, I need to charge overnight.
Of course.
So, and there's no supercharger on the way.
No.
So I actually put a plug at my cottage as well.
level 2.
And again, it was about $500 there. So, there's some extras that you're not going to have with a gas car. So I probably had about $1,500.
And did you get the actual Tesla wall plug? Or did
No.
you get a
You just use the UMC that comes with the
It was
car.
exactly like what I plug in my dryer or whatever.
So you just unplug it every day, throw it in the car, leave it at home?
I carry my charger cord in the car at all times, and they have the different adapters.
Yes, of course.
So what my routine today is actually they encourage you to leave it plugged in
All time.
at all time, which I try to do as much as I can. But then again, from an economic perspective, free charging at work, so I charge it all day at work. And when I get home, I very rarely have to use it at home.
Now, you mentioned your cottage is 2.5 hours north. Now, here in the Toronto area, we usually call this the Muskokas. Now, there's a supercharger, I should mention, in Barrie. Have you found yourself using that at all?
Actually, our cottage is on Lake Huron.
Okay.
So actually, there is no supercharger convenient on the way. It's kind of like normal 2-lane highways. The interesting part, each small town now has not superchargers, but they do have good chargers. And before I actually get the plug installed at my cottage, I actually would go into town, and the Canadian Tire had a charger, which I would leverage. The other thing is there's an app called PlugShare, I believe.
PlugShare, yes.
Which shows you all the plugs that are available, even folks like myself who are willing to share our plugs to other EV owners. So it hasn't been an issue.
Yeah, and we talked about on the show as well about the expansion of the Ontario charging infrastructure. With en route, they're going to be adding. They're already hardwired for it, so they'll be adding stations over the next year. So at least along the 400 corridors, 401s.
And the fast charging through, the level 3, the Chatham and the Combo CCS.
The superchargers are amazing though. Like when I go to my parents' house, who I do take the 401, which is a major freeway. There's a stop in Woodstock. It charges at like 500. It's incredible how quickly it charges versus at home. But you just have to get comfortable that you're going to stop and it's going to take you a half hour or so. If it's maybe potentially up to an hour to fully charge it.
What kind of range are you seeing right now?
My car has a 375. So in the summer, where you're not using the heater or the air conditioning and stuff like that, it's pretty good to the 375. Like where I found I have some potential issues and I have to plan a little bit differently. I remember taking one trip. It was the middle of the winter, so I got the heater on full bore. I got the windshield wipers going. I've got the lights on because it's at night. It was probably burning 50% faster than typically it would, so I probably had to plan an unscheduled stop, which is a little bit of an inconvenience factor, but...
Since you've only spent really one winter with the vehicle, did you ever go through the process of doing the preconditioning before you leave the home? Turn on the heat in the vehicle so that it warms up the battery pack so that you don't have as much...
Yes.
Yeah, you've gone through that. So
and that's one of my favorite features of the Tesla is whether it's last summer was extremely hot. I think we had days that were like close to 40. I remember looking at my app to see the interior. We'd go to the park with my little girl to play at the park. It'd be like 42 degrees in my car. So before I get in my car, I just remind myself to like turn the air conditioner on, 10 minutes before we're going to leave, and it gets it back down to like 22 degrees. Exactly. And then in the winter, when you get up in the morning, you want to kind of set the charge so that it warms up your batteries, but it also warms up the car. So that's probably one of my favorite features.
Well, you'll like the 8.0 new version of the software now because they have a new setting now where you can actually maintain the temperature at all times in the vehicle.
Yeah. And it has this kind of auto-learning feature too, which is I think the technology piece is probably one of the greatest benefits of Tesla, and I'm sure other car companies are going there as well, is it kind of learns your patterns.
Yes.
And it actually will do it for you in advance.
Oh, I did not know that. That's something new today. There you go. So you've got your car, you left the lot. What was, the follow-up? Was there any follow-up from Tesla? And if there was, what was that like? What was that experience?
I would say it was pretty, just any good sales experience, there's a follow-up, whether I believe they just send you an email, how are things going, is there any issues, etc.
More like a customer sat type of thing, any service?
No, it wasn't really a customer sat. It was more of just generally they want to know, are there any issues with the car? And I think that was, I don't know if that's a standard Tesla thing or that's just the folks at my store were just good at making sure they have satisfied customers. So I don't remember ever getting a customer sat survey. I know when I bought my other SUV afterwards, there was so many follow-up customer sat questionnaires.
That's from the dealer's perspective, right? Make sure
there was a dealer, and then there's also manufacturer.
Right. Yeah, I think the dealers from a traditional model, there's maybe not compensation is the right word, but there's something that the manufacturers, throw back to dealers or do for them if they get a higher customer sat. I know
Well, I think there's a tighter feedback loop with Tesla because obviously all their showrooms and stores are company owned.
Right.
So they have direct, access to all that information, whereas the dealer network has to be maintained to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I'm going through some issues myself.
For folks that are, as you said, part of your audience is you're talking about, they're not sure what to expect. I would say it's actually a very good experience. I think they manage it better than traditional car companies in terms of telling you the information you need to know at the right point and managing your expectations of when it's going to come, what is the next step in the process, all that information be available in your My Tesla website. The other thing is all my documentation today, even thinking about this interview, I'm like, oh my God, I can't remember the experience. So I went back into My Tesla and I can still see all my documents. My original agreements there, all the onboarding documents in terms of, there was also the guarantee. I think there was a certain amount of time, happy customer guarantee if you weren't happy. But all that's still sitting there. So, which I think from someone that's kind of more online centric, that's what I like. I don't have to go find a paper file sitting in my basement desk somewhere. It's like all available online. I can go back at any time and look at it.
And have you taken your car in for a routine service?
I'm about to do that, so it'll be interesting to know what that experience is like.
Okay.
So far you haven't really had any big issues with the vehicle?
No, I've had a couple little minor things.
Just like anybody.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a big question for you. 2 questions, in fact. Since this is a lease experience, and at the end of the lease, when you have to either make a decision, would you get another Tesla?
Oh, for sure. I actually would not go back. I don't think, until things change, I would never do 100% electric. I still think I'm going to have one gas vehicle and one electric vehicle, but my primary car is my electrical vehicle. And anytime I can drive it, I drive it first. The driver experience is so much better. The user experience is so much better. The rest of the car companies are catching up.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go out in the driveway and I have 2 cars sitting there, I'm in the Tesla. And it still has a wow factor. Like, it's funny. It's like more and more people in my neighborhood are getting them. So it's like it's not as. But I still, as I get outside of my neighborhood, it's not as popular, and I still get people. The funny part is, like, actually, it's kids. I'll be stopped at a stoplight, and there'll be like these, teenagers or 20-somethings, and they're like giving me the thumbs up, and you have to kind of clue in.
The crowd is more exposed.
Yeah, there's
to
a wow
technology.
factor.
They understand it. They get it because they're growing up in this world now where we have electric vehicles, and Tesla is the standout company.
Yeah.
So they gravitate towards that.
And I think people, what folks value today versus what they valued 10 years ago is different. I think Tesla is tapping into that kind of insight. Mm-hmm. The other funny story is where my cottage is a small town on Lake Huron. They have every long weekend they have a car show. And I'm not a car show kind of type of person.
You should be by now.
But my father-in-law and my 16-year-old son wanted me to put the car in the car show, so I put it in one weekend. And every other car were classic cars, like from the 40s, 50s, 60s, beautiful cars. Sure. And then I put the Tesla in. It was like in a smaller town, it was a huge wow factor. Most people aren't even aware what a Tesla is. What is this thing?
It's a California thing, but out here, it's still relatively,
a
rarity.
I would say the average Canadian is not even aware of what Tesla is, but I think it's becoming more intriguing. I think the whole Model 3 has really kind of created a lot of buzz. It's now attainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for our viewership, having owned a Model S, especially a Model, a 70D, what would you tell our viewership out there as far as expectations for the car? Would you say that it's going to be a phenomenal vehicle considering what you've experienced right now?
From my experience, you will have high expectations going in, and it will deliver on your expectations. There's no car that drives like it, especially in the city. Mm-hmm. You're at a stoplight, you just touch that gas, you're like, or gas. Accelerator. You just touch the accelerator, and you're like, 50, 100 yards in front of the next car in a second. I got the 70D. I questioned whether I needed the higher end one, but interesting enough, I don't know if I would ever need the power of the higher one. It's just the 70D has more than enough acceleration for me personally.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal car. I have no regrets. Every car is going to have its little bugs and stuff like that, but overall, as you said, I would definitely buy again.
You've covered everything. We appreciate you taking the time, Alan, out of your busy schedule to meet with us and to provide such great insight to the whole Tesla buying experience, which now it's got me even more excited. Like, I can't wait, and I'm sure our viewers are going to feel the same after watching this interview. And again, so on behalf of the Model 3 Owners Club show, we thank you very much for your time and for the information.
Thanks, folks. So that's it for this episode. If you want to follow us, you can follow us on Twitter. Our account is @Model3Owners. Consider joining our forum at model3ownersclub.com. And if you have any questions or concerns and you want to reach us via email, the email address is m3ocshow@gmail.com. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you. Take care.